So good morning everyone. I am Sturgeon Marie Pamatian and I'm going to discuss the biography of B.F. Skinner. So Burgess Frederick Skinner or mas kilala nila bilang Fred ay ipinanganak noong March 20, 1904 sa Susquehanna, Pennsylvania. Panganay na anak ni William Skinner at ni Grace Burgess Skinner. Yung papa niya na si William Skinner ay isang lawyer na gustong maging politician. Then yung mama niya naman is housewife. So merong kapatid si B.F. Skinner, which is si Edward Skinner. Mas matanda dito si Skinner ng 2.5 years at namatay si Edward ng 16 years old siya dahil sa cerebral hemorrhage. Si B.F. Skinner ay gusto niyang maging professional writer. So, yung first na na-publish niya na book noong 1948 ay tinawag niyang Walden 2. Skinner attended Hamilton College sa New York kung saan doon niya pinursue yung dream niya na maging writer. After receiving his Bachelor of Arts in English Literature in 1926, umuwi siya sa kanilang bahay, doon siya nanirahan kasama ng kanyang mga gulang. Doon din niya tinry na sumulat ng mga panibagong novel. Pero hindi yun naging successful. So, yung taon na yun, tinawag niya yun na dark years niya. So, nung na-realize niya na parang, parang wala akong future sa writing. Maghahanap na lang ako ng panibagong career. That's the time then na parang na-encounter niya tong si Watson tsaka si Pavlov na mga behaviorists. Then, parang karoon siya ng nasabi niya sa sarili niya na ay gusto ko rin maging behaviorist. Gusto kong gumawa ng sarili kong version ng behaviorism. So si Skinner received a PhD in Harvard in 1931 and nanatili siya doon bilang researcher. Tapos tumagal, naging prestigious board member siya doon. So Fred Keller convinced Skinner that he should make an experimental science. So, kinumbinsiya siya ni Fred Keller na gumawa ng sarili niyang experiment na nakapag-led sa kanya na makapag-invent ng prototype ng Skinner box. So, noong 1936, nagpakasala sila ni Yvonne Blue, kung saan nagkaroon sila ng 2 anak na babae, which is si Julie tsaka si Deborah. Nagturo si Skinner sa University of Minnesota, tapos lumipat siya sa Indiana University. Tapos, ng 1973, si Skinner daw ay naging isa sa mga signers ng Humanist Manifesto. Then, noong 1997 naman, si Yvonne Blue ay namatay. Noong 1970, doon tumaas yung public exposure ni B.F. Skinner sa mga tao. So, tapos ng 1989, na-diagnosed siya ng leukemia. And namatay siya noong August 18, 1990. Pero 10 days before mamatay siya, ginawaran siya ng award ng American Psychological Association. Okay. Next, behaviorism. This philosophy of behavioral science assumes that behavior is a consequence of environmental histories of reinforcement. So, dito, parang, yung behaviorism kasi parang adaptation lang sa environment. Second is philosophy of science. Philosophy of science, scientific behaviorism allows for an interpretation of behavior but not an explanation of its causes. So dito, parang hindi lang dapat na isang experiment or isang test lang ang dapat na gagawin mo. Dapat kapag gagawa ka ng research, kailangan mas maraming tests and experiments kang ikakandak para makuha mo yung mas magandang result. For example, si Skinner nag-generalize ng animal studies sa children tsaka sa adults. So, 'di ba? Hindi lang siya nag-base sa isang part lang. Naghanap pa siya ng iba para may ipagko-compare siya. Second, characteristic of science. According to Skinner, science has 3 main characteristic. So, ayon daw kay Skinner, meron daw 3 main na characteristic ang science. So, una na doon is science is cumulative. So, what is cumulative nga ba? Cumulative is increasing or increased in quantity, degree, or force by successive additions. Parang, yung mga similar words niya dito is growing, progressive, kanon. So, ibig sabihin, mas marami na tayong, for example na lang, sige, example na lang tayo. For example, tayo yung mga high school students ngayon. Yung mga high school students ngayon, mas maalam na sila tungkol sa mga physics, chemistry, mga ganyan, kesa sa ng mga tao 2,500 years ago. So, the second and most critical characteristic of science. So, etong second na to na ibibigay ko sa inyo is, ito daw yung pinaka-critical na characteristic ng science. At meron itong may tatlo pang nakapaloob doon. So, unahin natin yung first, it rejects authority. So, from the word rejects authority. So, parang kahit sino ka pa, kahit sabihin na natin si Einstein ka, pag nagsabi ka ng isang facts or statement, hindi ibig sabihin nun, totoo na yung sinabi mo. Dapat, pag sinabi mo yun, dapat meron kang test, meron kang observation dun sa sinabi mong yun. Parang meron kang support dun sa sinabi mo. So, second, science demands intellectual and honesty. So, scientist has to accept the fact. Kahit na yung facts na yon is kabaligtaran ng gusto mo, ng nais mo. Kasi parang sportsmanship lang. Once na natalo ka, tanggapin mo pagkatalo mo. Parang ganon. Finally, at yung last is science suspends judgment until clear trends emerge. So dito, parang ang sinasabi kasi is kailangan pagka lahat ng gagawin mo is tama. Parang hindi pwede dito yung bawal ka dito maglaro-laro kasi you're doing reputasyon mo ang nakasalalay dito. Yun. So, yun na yung final nung second. Then, the third characteristic of science is a search for order and lawful relationship. Lahat ng science nag-uumpisa sa observations, tapos magkakaroon ka ng conclusions, mga ganun. Hanggang sa ma-predict mo na yung mo. Halimbawa natin dyan, 'di ba? Meron tayong research. Sa research natin, meron tayong mga hypotheses, and then hanggang sa mapadpad tayo sa pinakasagot natin. Ganun. So, classical condition In classical condition, a neutral condition stimulus is paired with that is immediately precedes an unconditioned stimulus a number of times until it is capable of bringing about a previously unconditioned response, now called the conditioned response. So, sisimplihan lang natin siya. Ito yung classical condition, ito yung pagka may nag-trigger sa'yo, tsaka ka lang magre-react. For example, pag yung eyes mo natamaan or yung mata mo, pag natamaan yan ng light, yung pupil mo nagko-contract siya, 'di ba? So yun na yun. Ang nag-trigger sa iyo is yung light para mag-react yung pupils mo. Is another example. Pagka yung paminta, may naamoy kang paminta or may nasinghot ka na paminta, yung ilong mo, nagkakaroon siya ng, parang gusto mong mag-umatching. So, yung nag-trigger sa'yo doon is yung pepper at yung reaction mo is yung mag-atching. So, yun.
I am Chona Jane Almansor Sara and I will going to present the operant conditioning. So although classical conditioning is responsible for some human learning, si Skinner naniwala siya that most human behaviors are learned through operant conditioning. Katulad na nga lang sa may Skinner box, na nung pinasok niya yung rat sa isang box, then nagpaikot-ikot lang yung rat, then yung ginawa niya, linagyan niya ng lever and food, then natuto yung rat na every push niya ng lever, merong nalalaglag na food or merong pumapasok na food. So, natuto yung rat na every pull niya ng lever, may pagkain siya makukuha as a reward. So, merong reinforcement and punishment. Sa reinforcement, and sabi, it strengthened the behavior, while punishment, it reduced the behavior. Sa reinforcement, katulad na lang na sa English test, ang sabi ng magulang niya, kapag nakapasa siya sa test or every test, makaka-receive siya ng money. Katulad na rin na sa negative reinforcement, merong Bible study na need to memorize the books of the Bible. And yung dad niya, he kept nagging to her to memorize it until it memorize it for real. Ito yung negative reinforcement. Para matuto ka, nagiging negative yung way para ma-reinforce ka. So, sa punishment, example din nito yung sinabihan ka na huwag hawakan yung lamp kasi mainit to, pero you still insist to touch that lamp. So, yung naging learning behavior mo doon na hindi mo nahahawakan yung lamp. Kasi, yung unpleasant stimulus, yung heat, nagkukos ng pain sa'yo. So, merong dalawang reinforcement. Ito yung continuous reinforcement and partial reinforcement. Sa continuous reinforcement, it is a reinforcer, a response every time. So, an example nito is yung giving a child a chocolate every day after he finish math homework. So, dito, alam niya na ito yung nagiging reinforcer mo na every time na may natatapos siya na math homework, alam niya na makaka-receive siya ng chocolate. So, every time na gagawa siya nun, mas eager siya na matapos yun kasi alam niyang may reward siyang makukuha. So, in partial reinforcement, ito yung reinforcer that responds occasionally. So, here's Ms. Sturgeon Pamatian to discuss the schedule of reinforcement.
Sa schedule of reinforcement, meron tayong 4 basic intermittent schedule. First is the fixed ratio. The number of response or amount of time between reinforcement is set and unchanging. So, for example natin is getting 1 meal after purchase of 10, losing your driver's license after the violation. So, like sinabi kasing ratio, mayroong ratio kasi may involved na numbers. So, ayun nga, katulad nga ng sinabi dito, parang 1:5, kanon. Tulad na tong losing your driver's license after 5 violation. violation. Parang 1:5. So, yung 5, 'di ba? Pag nagkaroon ka ng 5 violation, like for example, meeting the red light, over speeding. So, pag nakalima kang violation, matatanggal na yung nag-iisa mong licensed driver. Driver's license pala. Sorry. So, another one is getting 1 meal after purchase of 10. So, pag bumili ka daw ng 10 meal, magkakaroon ka ng isa. Ganon. Another one is variable ratio. Reinforcement occurs after a varying number of responses. For example, playing the lottery, the number of shots to score a goal in a soccer. Ito naman, percentage lang siya eh. Parang hindi ka sure kung may mapapala ka, parang ganon. And next natin is fixed interval. Fixed interval schedule, an exact amount of time passes between each reinforcement. For example, studying for a weekly quiz, getting your paycheck every 2 weeks. So, parang meron kang period of time. For example, katulad nga ng example dito, studying for a weekly quiz. Ikaw magde-decide dito kung nag-aaral ka ba 3 days before your quiz or sa araw mismo ng quiz. Variable interval. A varying amount of time passes between each reinforcement. Minsan mo lang siyang gagawin. Kung kailan ka lang tinamaan. I mean, kung kailan mo lang gusto gawin, tsaka mo lang gagawin. Ganon.
So this is Skinner's human organism. There's natural selection, cultural evolution, inner states, and also a purpose and intention. Sa natural selection, ang sabi ni Skinner, human personality is the product of a long evolutionary history. As individuals, our behavior is determined by genetic composition and especially by our personal histories of reinforcement. Ang sabi pa nga, ang natural selection plays an important part in human personality. So, ang example nito, yung they favored those individuals whose pupils of their eyes dilated and contracted with changes in lightning. Yung superior ability nila to see during both daylight and nighttime enabled them to avoid life-threatening dangers and also to survive to the age of reproduction. Pwede rin na example yung infant whose head turned into the direction of a gentle stroke of the cheek were able to suckle. Yung mas na-increase nila yung chances of survival and likelihood that this rooting characteristic will be passed on their offspring. So next one, yung cultural evolution. So Skinner elaborated more fully on the importance of culture in shaping human personality. Ang sabi nga, selection is responsible for those cultural practices that have survived, or selection plays a role in human evolutionary history and also with the contingencies of reinforcement. So, example nga nito, yung humans do not make a cooperative decision to do what is best for the society. But those societies, most members behave cooperatively, tended to survive. Katulad na lang din na sa kapag may groupings, merong mga tao na hindi nakikipag-cooperate. Yung mga tao na yun, they tended not to survive in the society. Pero yung mga tao na nakikipag-cooperate, kahit hindi sila gaano kagaling, they tended to survive in our society. Mas sila yung may chances na makasurvive sa community o kung nasaan mang silang lugar. So, in inner state, Skinner did not deny the existence of inner state, such as love, anxiety, and of course, fear. So sabi, inner states can be studied just as any other behavior, but their observation is of course limited. Then there's this quotation na galing kay Skinner na what is the role of inner state as self-awareness, drives, emotions, and purpose. So let's move on to self-awareness. So Skinner believed that humans not only aware of their environment but are also aware of themselves as part of their environment. Katulad na lang na yung a worker reports to a friend that I was so frustrated today that I almost quit my job. So yung private event na to is due with her verbal report to her friend can be scientifically analyzed. So paano nga kapag scientifically analyze yung ganitong statement? Ang sabi, I am observing within myself increasing degrees of frustration which are raising the probability that I will inform my boss that I am quitting. So sabi, this statement is more accurate than saying I almost quit my job. And it refers to behavior that although private is within the boundaries of scientific analysis. So, ganun daw dapat yung magiging response mo kapag gagamitan mo siya kapag inanalyze siya through scientific. So, next one, drives. From the viewpoint of radical behaviorism, drives die not caused because of causes of behavior, but merely explanatory fiction. So, according to Skinner, drive simply refer to the effects of deprivation and satiation and to the corresponding probability that the organism will respond. So, ang sabi nga, kapag dinedeprive mo yung tao sa pagkain, mas nag-i-increase yung likelihood nila na kumain. Kapag pinigilan mo naman sila, kung hinahayaan mo sila na kumain, mas nagdi-decrease yung likelihood nila na kumain. So, deprivation and satiation. Tapos ang sabi, kapag nagde-deprive ka at siya nagsasatiation are not the only way, not the other factors that increase or decrease the probability of eating. Meron din na intentionally observe of pangs, availability of food, and of course, a previous experience with food reinforcer. Next one is purpose and intention. So sabi ni Skinner, nirecognize niya yung concept of purpose and intention, but again, he cautioned against attributing behavior to them. So sa purpose, if you believe that your purpose for jogging is to feel better and live longer, then this thought per se acts as a reinforcing stimulus, especially while undergoing the changery of jogging or when trying to explain your motivation to a non-runner. So, kapag alam mo yung purpose mo, then that's a purpose. So, intention. A person may intend to see a movie Friday evening because viewing similar films has been reinforcing. At the time the person intends to go to the movie, she feels a physical condition within the body and label it as an intention. What are called intention or purpose, therefore are physically felt stimuli within the organism and not metallistic events responsible for behavior. So Skinner, sabi niya, the consequence of operant behavior are not what the behavior is now for. They are merely similar to the consequence that have shaped and maintained it. Let's proceed to control of human behavior. Ang sabi, individual's behavior is controlled by environmental contingencies. So yung those contingencies are from society o kaya sa ibang tao or environment na responsible for our behavior. So, in social control, individuals act to form social group because such behavior tends to be reinforcing. Groups, in turn, exercise control over their members by formulating written or unwritten laws, rules, and customs that have physical existence beyond the lives of individuals. So, society exercises control over its members through the four principal methods of operant conditioning. Ito yung positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, and the two techniques of punishment. Katulad na example ko kanina nung diniscuss ko yung operant conditioning. So, sa self-control, people people control their own behavior, they do so by manipulating the same variables that they would use in controlling someone else's behavior, and ultimately, these variables are outside themselves. So people can change their environment thereby increasing the probability of the desired behavior. Example nga nito, yung a student wanting to concentrate on his study can turn off a distracting television set. So ginagawa niya yun kasi nagsa-self-control siya sa sarili niya na para makapag-concentrate siya ng maayos, kailangan niyang alisin lahat ng mga distraction. Next one, yung people can arrange their environment so that they can escape from an adversive stimulus only by producing the proper response. Katulad na nga lang na woman can set an alarm clock so that the aversive sound can be stopped only by getting out of bed to shut off the alarm. So yun yung self-control niya para bumangon siya o magising siya na kailangan niyang tayuin yung alarm clock para mapatay niya at para din na rin siya madistorbo.
Good day everyone. I'm Christian Pole Avila. My topic is the unhealthy personality. So what is the unhealthy personality? The unhealthy personality has an counteracting strategies which are escape, revolt, and passive resistance. Escape strategy. Escape strategy. This is the people who choose to live alone than to communicate with others because they are afraid that they might get hurt. Ayaw nilang nasasaktan, kaya ayaw nilang mag-commit. Revolt. These people behave more actively counter-attacking the authorities. Ito yung mga taong kumokontra in a legal way. Passive resistance. Passive resistance is a way of protesting in which an authority, such as government, is challenged non-violently. For example, it includes peaceful marches or orientations, boycotts and brands or companies, or refusing to the law issued by the government. Inappropriate behavior. Inappropriate behavior, like most behaviors, inappropriate or unhealthy response are learned. Therefore, may be the reason why a person is acting inappropriate behavior is because of what happened on her or his past. Psychotherapy. Psychotherapy focuses on your current problem with the current persons around you, including how you communicate with others such as your family and friends. Therefore, it is a talk combined with medication to cure some mental illness. Ganon. And the last one, how conditioning affects personality. Conditioning affects personality. We said the key elements of personality are stability of behavior over time and across different situations. Somehow, it affects your personality. For example, smartphone tones, advertising, aromas, dogs, report card, and etc.